Welcome back. I know you enjoyed this fantastic film, and it's my pleasure to also welcome back the director of Rita Moreno, just a girl who decided to go for it, Mariem Perez Riera. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
This is such a lovely, lovely film, and obviously there's great sorrow in it and great joy at the same time. But before we get into all that, I just want to know a little bit about how you got involved in this. It certainly makes unbelievable sense, and I'm so happy you were involved because it's a magnificent film. But could you give us a little bit of history?
Yes, so Brent Miller, who is the producer of One Day at a Time, the show where Rita plays the grandmother. She plays the grandmother of my son, Marcel Ruiz, who's part of that same show. And so I was basically there for almost 4 years of the show. But after the first year, I overheard Brent talking about wanting to make a documentary on Rita. And at the same time, I was a stage mom at that moment, watching my son. I mean, at that moment specifically, because I've done many other films. But when I was on the set, I kept watching Rita and always thinking, oh my God, if I can ever make a documentary on her, I would do this and that and that. Because I was observing her without even no one knowing. And so when Brent started looking for directors, I asked him if I could also pitch my idea, and that's how I came into the project.
Well, I'm so happy you did. What were the things that were going through your mind at the time when you were thinking how exciting a project this could be for you?
So because Rita is such an icon, and she's also an icon for me as a Puerto Rican and for the Puerto Rican community, just seeing her without makeup, seeing her in an everyday life, seeing her driving to set or needing help with something or grabbing her own food, it made it she I wanted to show that. I wanted to show that part of herself, her without makeup, her without a camera in front of her. And I wanted to show her in her life, in her house, just having breakfast in the morning. So to me, it was very important to show not just like a show reel of her career, but to really go more in depth on her vulnerabilities. And that was part of my pitch, but also I wanted to introduce this the stop motion animation of the paper
I
doll,
love that.
because when I read her book, I kept thinking of that. I kept thinking I used to play with those paper dolls, and I'm sure she did too. And I kept thinking of her as that fragile doll who becomes whoever you want her to become whenever you put a different dress on
Mm.
her. And that's what she's been doing since she was a little girl, first with her family, and then in the world in her different performances. But it's not until now, as we see in the documentary, that she has finally found her voice and her true self. So for a long time, I think she's been that little Rosita, that paper doll.
Yeah, and I don't think people really knew that. They know that, you know, how fun she can be, and they don't know a lot of the backstory that's in this film. But I also want to talk a little bit about the stop motion animation and the things that you did to create this poignancy and the intimacy as well. And I love the jazz coming in and out of the film too. That it's such a great, great touch and sets the mood for it.
Yes, the music from the beginning, I knew I wanted it to be jazz. That's one of Rita's favorite music too, genres of music. And because I think it represents that time when she was growing up in her career in New York City. And so I wanted to use it. the jazz, but also the incidental music that I use in the documentary. We have songs from La Lupe, who is this Latina woman who also lived in New York almost at the same time and struggled a lot. And her songs are amazing. The first one in the movie, Puro Teatro, which is how you fake it all the time when you're acting, right? And I also wanted to use Funny All Stars because they're a very important band that from immigrants in New York City as well, and it shows that that greatness of musicians and of immigrants in New York City at the time, and Nina Simone also. So to me, it was important. The music, it was as important as the animation. The animation is made by Kike Rivera, who's a Puerto Rican stop motion animator, and I loved the work that he did with that.
No, it works perfectly. When it's not, for me, the exceptional part of, say, for the stop animation is, yes, it's lovely to have that in there and it changes the film. But as you started to talk about the transition from her as that scared little girl who just wanted to please everything to what most people know of her, somebody who's just goes for it, as she says in the title of the movie, but also is brave and broke all these barriers. But the challenges that she faced, it just makes such perfect sense. But obviously that's for me in retrospect.
Yes, and that's that little girl, that little doll, which is representing also her insecurities, but also the fragile and the vulnerable that we all have inside, even though we put a mask on and go for it, we're inside, we're always fragile and we're always insecure in a way.
The movie is about triumph and it is about joy. And as Rita says, you know, going to the light. Mm-hmm. But when you look at all the incredibly tragic things that have happened to her as an immigrant, and not just only the struggles in terms of finding her voice in this profession that is so difficult, but rape and abortion and suicide attempts, and we could go on and on. It's such fortunate for us that she just kept getting younger as she was getting older, and she was able to find herself. But for you, did she, when you were making the movie, let me put it this way, did she talk more about her leaving her father and her brother? Because of all the tragic things that we hear, and how what an amazingly strong woman she, and the way she found herself. There was just this mention of this, and as a parent, and of course, as we all were children, were there any further discussions, anything that was on the cutting room floor, or a discussion you can divulge that was semi-private?
No, it was there, and I really wanted to include it in the documentary, but anywhere we would put it, it would make it even more down. And in terms of the rhythm, at the end, we had to take it out. But that's her biggest regret, is not being able to see her brother ever again. She saw her father a couple of times more because he came to visit her, but she never saw her brother. And that to me is one of the things that she continues to carry with her. And that is one of the heaviest things that she continues to carry with, which is not being able to see her brother ever again. And he's not alive anymore. So she was never able to communicate with him and to contact him. When she did, it was too late. And that was part of it's on her book also, but it's part of the things that we didn't put on the documentary.
Yeah, I was almost in tears just when in that brief part of it. It could have been changed the arc of the film tremendously. The fact that was also stunning, even though I had heard it before, was that after she received the Academy Award, she didn't make a movie for 7 years. Now, we always hear these stories of Academy Award winners who, you know, had actually not the incredible positive reaction in terms of their career after they got it, but my God, 7 years. But in a sense, and I wonder if you felt the same way, it seemed like a blessing in a way for her to be able to experiment and, well, not experiment, but to go into different areas of entertainment in the medium.
Exactly. Because of that, she started doing more theater, and she was able to go to London and work over there as well. So I think it was important for her career. And she didn't want to make other movies with the same, you know, the same stereotypes, which it's crazy because at the end, she ended up having to do it. She needed the money. She tried very hard for 7 years to say no to those type of movies. That was the only thing that she kept being offered. But at the end, she had to work, which is sad.
Yeah, and it was also really interesting when she said, you know, I read it, it wasn't maybe in the movie, or did I see it in another interview? I'm not sure. But that Anita, in a sense, from West Side Story, was her role model. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, that really makes sense. But again, well, how sad, you know, and the fact that she struggled so much, as many other immigrants have who entered this really tough business, or just in general. And the fact that she became such an activist, and the film really talks a lot about that, because you can see how it is, how important it is to her. And I think it's very important to you too, as the director. Could you talk a little bit more about that element?
Yes, I think it's amazing how she was able to recognize that Anita became her role model. It was the woman that she would have wanted to be long before, and that woman that can say whatever she wants and be a strong woman to, and respected or not, but being able to be free in terms of saying what she wanted to say. And I think it's because of Anita and because of being able to make that movie that she was, that was a seed inside of her that kept coming out little by little. And it came out in her activism, yes, but it also continued to come out in her life until now. Even in this movie, being able to say everything that she wants to talk about, and that maybe is things that are very hard to talk about and things that are very private and of her life, but being able to say it, it's a way of freeing her spirit, I think. And yes, she says a lot of things in the movie that I completely relate to, and maybe that's why they're there, because there's a lot of things that she talks about that she went through, that I've gone through, that are experiences that I've also had, and not even the hardest one, but they were hard enough for me. And understanding that she went through that 50, 60 years before me, it's amazing how she has accomplished and how she is so full of life right now, and so self-aware. And I want to be like her. I in seeing her, I realized, wow, this is an inspiration to me. It was like going, I was going to therapy every time that I would interview her. It was as if she was my therapist, my private therapist.
And she refers to her therapy too, and what a great experience it was. Um, I can imagine how difficult it was for her to talk about some of these things, and certainly about her relationship with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And her daughter, in her relationship with her daughters, is so lovely to watch, how close they are. And how do you think that's something that she's still dealing with, from the death of her husband at this point, or has she
Um,
reconciled that, and her daughter as well, how she reacted to that?
yes, when I show the documentary to them, which was when it was completely finished and color corrected and all of that, that was something that I was worried about, and on how her daughter particularly, how was she gonna take this part of the movie, because she's talking about her dad, and Rita is saying basically that she's relieved after his death. She can be who she wants to be now. And so it was hard. It was hard to include it in the documentary, but I thought it was very important to include it, because I think we as women, many of us go through that too. When I was interviewing her, particularly about her husband, I was going through a divorce. So
Mm.
what she was saying was so similar to what I was feeling. And so it was more important for me to include it in the documentary because of that. And because I know of other women who go through that, and men too, who stay in relationships that they don't want to be in, but stay in it. And once, for those who can and are able to come out of those relationships, they're relieved. So to me, it was important to show that. And when I talked to her daughter about it, she was very kind to tell me that she understands, and that she also is happy that we show that in the movie, because I think we also show that her husband was a great man, and a
Mhm.
very loving person. It was just not the right fit for her after so many years of their relationship. And I think everyone can understand that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's anybody who's been married for a length of time has certainly gone
Exactly.
through the changes of people growing differently, and not
Yeah,
just
and we're not saying anything bad about her husband. It's just how their relationship end up being.
yeah. The only difference is this is so public. She's such a public figure. And
I
the
know,
rest of us
and
could deal with it in private.
exactly. And because she's an icon, and because she's someone who we can look up to, it's even more important that she can tell us these stories, because she's someone that we look up to, and knowing that she struggles with that as well makes it more inspiring to those who are struggling with that. She's that person who is telling us, hey, that's okay, I've gone through that myself as well.
I think there's a lot of people who are going to say, I want to be like Rita. Maybe that should be a button we could wear. And
Exactly, I want to be like her.
right, and unfortunately, a lot of little girls too, and that's amazing. Um, did she ever say which of her incredible awards she was most proud of when you, in that such rarefied company as winning, being an EGOT? Sounds
You
like a
know,
bird though, doesn't it? And um, yeah, I'm sorry, please go
I
ahead.
never asked her, I never did, but I think it's her Oscar, because that's the one that she carries with her when she goes to Culver City, where her apartment is, when she's doing one day at a time, when she's shooting the episodes. That's the one that she brings with her. So I can imagine it's that one.
And I was also looking at all the other acknowledgments that she's done when we talk about the importance of so many things that are part of her life and unfortunately part of this movie of being an immigrant, racism, sexism, brutality, men's generally, the way that men treat each other. And I'm not just saying men as in general, it's men primarily. I think she must take tremendous pride in those recognition as well.
Yes, and I think that's why it's important that we have that in the documentary, because it's showing how she put up with a lot of things and still has so much joy and so much. She's a young woman, like you said, she's becoming younger with the years. And I think it has to do with being able to talk about it and being able to not keep it inside of her, but being able to express her moments of hardships and also her moments of joys.
So what do you think the climate is now for, particularly for Spanish language filmmakers and actors? Are you seeing some progress?
It's very difficult for us as the Latinx community because we come from so many different backgrounds and so many different cultures. So to be put up all of us in one box, it's really hard to make shows or documentaries about that theme. It's hard. And I think it's important to continue telling different stories from different backgrounds in the Latinx community so that we can understand that we are different, even though we speak the same language and that we come from different cultures and different experiences. My experience is very different to the Mexican experience or to the Brazilian or Argentinian experience. So I think by making stories that are more smaller, that are more into that microcosm of each of us, is a way of becoming more universal, because our stories are also stories that anyone can relate to. And I think that's the way of us getting together, or of us showing more interest to the American community. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that that's coming. It's still very hard, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, it reminds me of the California Film Institute, which is doing DocLands. We also distribute films, and we did a little film called Life and Nothing More, directed by Antonio Mendez Esparza. And his first film, which he shot in Mexico, won the Critics Award in Cannes. And Life and Nothing More was about a Black family in Tallahassee. And people questioned him, you know, in a sense, not aggressively, but, you know, why you making the story? And what he said was, and I'm just thinking it in relationship to what you said, he goes, I was born in Madrid. I am from Spain. I went to Mexico, rural Mexico. I never lived in Mexico. I speak Spanish, but I was an outsider. I was the alien, or would have been the immigrant if I lived there. And that's what I do. I give it this different perspective. And I think it would be fantastic to see more of these smaller films, that, because we know there are no small films, because if they're done well, as you said, they're universal and they create empathy. But to see the Spanish language community of filmmakers to be doing not only stories about their own country, but other ones from an outside perspective as well. I mean, it's done. It would be
exactly
a plethora of just great, interesting films that I know personally I would look forward to as well.
Yeah, I think we can even, yeah, it's amazing how different perspectives is what makes movies more interesting, right? And even with women also that happens. We don't need to be, it doesn't have to be a women subject for only for us to do it. I mean, we could do any movie because we bring our own perspective, and that's what makes it different. In the same way as men have made a lot of movies about
Right.
women's stories, we can do the same thing, and that happens also with the Hispanic and Latinx community. Yes.
Well, we're looking for them here at the California Film Institute, so please let us know. I wanted to ask you one more question. When I speak to a lot of filmmakers, actors, or directors, they seem to, when they look back on a film that they finished, whether it's months or years, sometimes the things that they think of are not, well, actually, that was a great scene, but the experience that they had on the set and making the movie and the relationships, or they could be relationships, they could be anything. And certainly with a narrative film, yes, you can relate to, say, oh, I was on location and the people in this town, this country, they were extraordinary in the way we dealt with them. But in your case, you're dealing with this amazing woman and in a biography, a documentary, obviously. What were those things that you took away as the director, making this in kind of a similar fashion that one would not necessarily expect? Or maybe you would.
I don't know exactly, but just the experience of following her. We were a small crew of Puerto Ricans following her. So we would talk in Spanish all the time between us because it's our main language. And I think it was very beautiful for her to listen to us talking in Spanish because it brought her back to when she was a little girl in Puerto Rico. And for her, it was the first time that she was in a set with more Spanish speakers than English speakers. So when she told us that, and when she gave us that experience, I realized that I've been very lucky to always work in a community of mostly Spanish speakers, and it's important for me in order to be able to express myself and to relate. And this was actually the one that I had to work with more English speakers than Spanish. So for her, it was the opposite experience than it was for me, because although the small amount of the main people, I mean, the producer on set and the DP and the sound guy, we were all Puerto Ricans, everyone else wasn't. So it was the first time for me to be with more English speakers. And knowing that made me also observe that and appreciate what I've had in previous experiences making films, but also acknowledging that, yeah, that we come from different backgrounds and cultures, and that can set the tone on a set. And I think the fact that she could listen to us speaking in Spanish also set the tone for her to be more open and for her to be able to connect with that little girl in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that's a gift, definitely a gift. Would it be amazing if she made one of those little universal films in Spanish?
Oh, yeah.
And she got nominated for another Academy Award.
That would be amazing, yes.
It would be. Well, Mariem, it's just such a pleasure to have your film here at DocLands and to have you here in person for this conversation. I wish you just tremendous success with it, and as many as people as possible can see this wonderful film on Rita Moreno.
Thank you so much for having me and for such a great conversation.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.